I'll do my best. I have little ones that
All
I
right.
have to take care of here and there. So
You're recording, Joe?
Yeah. Okay, so you
Okay.
start off with the questions
All right.
and stuff, and
Here's the first question. Based on the recent uprising and mass shooting, mass murder, do you think that certain gun legislation would have stopped or reduced the number of fatalities? And we will take the first argument to Brenda.
I think that gun control reduces the amount of mass murder. It, you know, I think that's just common sense that the fewer guns that are in society and the more that you restrict access to guns to people who are mentally ill or people who ought not to have guns, you're going to reduce the incidence of mass murders. Mass murders are defined as any killing where you or incident where you have 4 or more people who are casualties in a gun-related incident.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just letting you know, you have about like 4 minutes and 30 seconds to explain that. I mean, you can't.
Well, it's just the case that more guns equals more homicides. Most, you know, the
I'm following you.
it's just that we have experience with restricting access to guns, and it has reduced in other countries reduced the amount of mass murders.
Okay.
So, I mean, are we allowed to shorten that?
if that's all you want to say, Brenda, for now, we can go up to the next person and they have
Sure.
5 minutes to speak.
Sure.
All right, hold on. I need to start
Okay,
the clock over. So hold on. All right, so B, go ahead and explain why you're for gun.
I just want to touch further on what Brenda was referring to. I certainly understand and recognize information that has come out regarding gun control and legislation involving gun control that has helped in certain communities or countries other than America around the world, where it's made an impact that is mostly positive. However, I believe that regardless of what the legislation is, of course, there's legislation that I will recognize that could eventually make its way to America that wouldn't necessarily revoke the Second Amendment rights to basically almost down to nothing. I think really the problem lies in mental well-being and just societal togetherness. I think that there, for instance, I live in Florida. Don't dox me. I'm sure you already have. I live in Florida, and after this Parkland shooting just a month and a half ago, I look at it this way, and I'm just using this as my starter example. Nicholas Cruz, he killed 17 people. He did the duty. I don't give a shit what happens to him now. Whether he rots in jail, gets the death penalty, probation for the rest of his life, and he lives in a house where cops watch him 24/7 and bring him McDonald's. I don't know what the hell he's going to get, but I don't care what happens to him. What I do care, though, is I have pity for him as a human being, because nobody was there. He didn't have any direction as a young child. We can't look at children, and he is a child. I don't care how old he is, 20, 21. I remember that age. You're still a child, essentially, especially in today's world. I mean, we're not talking about young adults in the 1950s who are actually doing hard practical labor, and they're working and they're learning morals and tradition. We're talking about a young free millennial in a society that is so warped and wild today that nobody wants to look out for one another, not even parents, foster parents even. I mean, this kid, he lost his parents at a young age. He lost his dad when he was young, his foster dad. He was adopted. His mother died just about a year and a half ago. I mean, and then he had to live with a friend whose family already thought he was weird. The other students thought he was weird. He had tendencies since he was a child that were sociopathic, that nobody was willing to really try and, you know, drive it home to him. His peers, other kids around him, never wanted to reach out to him. I don't see that necessarily as like a bad thing, especially if he exhibits those tendencies. But I think that is society's failure right there, that if we can't empathize and help instruct one another away from these kind of tendencies, especially children at a young age, when they knew he was doing shit that was sociopathic as a kid, he was bound to end up this way. I mean, I've been depressed. I've been alienated in my life. I understand what that feels like. You know, you want to end it all. You want to just do whatever you can to nuke the situation in front of you so that it never returns. And that's where I feel about Nikolas Cruz. I feel like society failed him. He failed us. And that's the end of it. But I don't think it was the gun's fault. I don't think really legislation would have made it fast enough, considering the way politics are handled, especially in my state. I don't think any legislation would have prevented this. I do think, however, that it's up to law enforcement and local communities to try and get their head around and have a discussion about what it should be required to own these types of firearms. Now, I know a lot of these kids that have been marching, these Parkland students, they're being paraded around on social media, in my opinion, as like breakfast cereal characters. They're like cartoons, essentially. I mean, they're just everywhere. They're shoved in our face. And I feel bad for those kids because they went through a traumatic situation and now they're being manipulated by dollar signs and all kinds of shit and just publicity in general, Twitter followers. I mean, if I was that age and that shit happened to me, I remember myself at 18. Of course, I'd be ignorant enough to be like, hell yeah, let me preach for you. You know, like it's all about me, you know. So I don't think there's anything that could have been done necessarily to prevent, especially something like that, other than, you know, the lack thereof legislation and discussion for it that it has been missing this whole time. You know, I think there's a reasonable answer to how we can control guns here in the United States and in other countries where they have issues.
20 seconds.
But I'm all for guns. I mean, that's my stance. We took the country using guns. Might have not been a nice way. But that's how we established who we are in this world and kept ourselves where we are fairly.
All right. That was a good argument. B. Now we will let the argument pace to an open discussion for 5 minutes between Brenda and B.
Sure. No, I agree with you, Brenda. I do. I think there's things we can do to change this, but I don't think, you know, I don't think being anti-gun is the right answer.
I'm not in favor of a total ban on guns. However, I do want to greatly restrict people's access to guns and to types of guns.
Mm-hmm.
I want people who are mentally ill shouldn't be able to get guns. People who there should be an age limit. And there should be types of guns and types of military hardware that are not available to the general people. I don't think people should have access to
just outrageous machinery, weapons.
Military ordnance, I guess you'd say, right?
Right.
I don't think they should have access to grenade launchers and shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles or tank or things like that. That would be a bad idea.
Understandable.
I'm against. I would like one thing where we might disagree is I'd like to return to where you're not allowed to open carry, and concealed carry is severely restricted. It used to be that the requirements for concealed carry were pretty odious. You had to go to the local police or sheriff, and you had to prove that you had a need to carry a gun and that you were competent to carry a gun. And now that's not the case. And I think that more restrictions on that should be. I don't think people should be walking around carrying guns. And I think that if we restricted access to guns, we would have an experience like we did in Australia, where we had a reduction in mass murders. And in general, in places where there are restrictions on guns and they can control guns coming into or out of their country or their area, then you get a reduction in gun-related crimes, and that's what my goal is, to reduce gun-related crimes and homicides and suicide. Suicide is another factor. People who have access to guns commit suicide with guns, and if you're not going to survive a suicide, people often regret suicide attempts because they're fucked up
When
They're
they aren't
mentally-
successful. Yeah, I
Right,
know what you're
right.
saying.
Right. So you're more likely to be unsuccessful with the different means, and you're pretty likely to be successful if you stick a barrel in your mouth and pull the trigger. You're not going to walk away from that.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I will agree. Like, suicide is one of the biggest killers of young men under 40. I mean, if you find yourself in this society as essentially building its way around beauty and aesthetic and like the way women and men are portrayed. I'm not trying to get this into like this whole like social imagery type of nonsense. I'm just the way that kind of does subconsciously, it does kind of produce a narrative amongst people where certain people that don't follow these norms, these unspoken norms, they become alienated. And when they don't have people there that can show them empathy, or at least try to help them understand the error of their ways, to kind of get them to not necessarily repent, just kind of reformulate their lifestyle into a more productive type of thing, I don't think we would have as many of those problems or as many of those suicides even. I mean, I think it's tough because like bad people are always going to do what bad people want to do. And it's up to society not to put rules in place necessarily that, it try to make the bad people less able to do the bad things. I think society as a whole should come together and try and it's really hard to do, especially in a country with 320 million Americans, another 30 million illegal, people living here, or immigrants essentially that are just not documented in general. I mean, we have almost 350 million people in the United States. It's going to be very hard to get the comparison of the East and West Coast compared to these flyover states, as they're called, to get them to really agree, especially within those smaller communities that exist within there, to try and find some kind of coherent line everybody can get on board with. It's a little too, it's too big, I feel like. That whole saying, too big to fail. That's not necessarily true anymore. I mean,
Okay. The timer is up for 5 minutes, and we need to move on to the next question. So.
sure.
Okie doke.
All right. So the second question is: what are some measures that you think that will decrease the number of gun deaths per year? We'll start off with Brenda.
Well, we need background checks, and they need to be look at the entire person's background.
I agree.
That would be one. I would like to see there is technology that enables either fingerprint or handprint or some kind of lock on guns. So that is possible to do, and I would like to see legislation that would require the user's fingerprint to operate the gun, because a lot of times guns are stolen, and stolen guns are used to commit crimes. So if we had a lock built into the gun where only the user could use it, you had to use some sort of ID like your fingerprint, like we use on our iPhones to shoot it, that would be better. Another would simply be reducing access to things like, or having large magazines, having bump stocks, having access to guns that are of military use only. There's no reason for civilians to carry around a military assault weapon. I'd like to get rid of those things. I'm not opposed to owning a gun for personal protection, but you don't need to own military style weapons. Those are the things that I would like to see enacted. I'm done.
Okay.
I think that's enough.
Okay. All right. That was good. We'll take the conversation to base Zoom with 5 minutes to discuss what certain legislation could lower the gun death rate per year.
I definitely. I go.
Hold on. I need to set the clock.
Absolutely.
Okay, go.
I definitely think. I definitely know there's legislation that we can come up with that can help reduce these incidents. I mean, I don't think necessarily it has to come from a federal level. I think we have to get the federal government to agree, but I think that at the end of the day, legislation that helps prohibit guns and gun use, like you're talking about something like an ID tag, where it only works for thumbprints to the person that owns the gun. A hypothetical example, but not one I'm trying to use to study my argument. I live at home with my father because he's disabled. I help take care of him. If he had an ID tag on his gun and somebody were to get the upper hand on him because of his obvious disability, and I were to try and pick up the gun and then use it on this home invader or whatever's going on, well, I wouldn't be able to do anything. I wouldn't be able to protect myself. I feel like there's like a flaw there, and I'm not trying to just make my argument about this flaw. I just want to point that out is all I'm saying. Maybe there's something that they could do that would, like, maybe you can set it up for only your family is identified to use these weapons, and if they're trained on it. I mean, if anything like that, we should encourage the mental health and the background checks, and I think that we really need to. I think we need to send somebody out to your house to talk to you, to get to know you, to get like a real opinion. Or I don't think I think maybe they could send you to a doctor that could probably sit down with you. I mean, not even just a doctor, like an actual clinical psychologist, somebody that can understand human nature and intent, solely off of, having a one-on-one discussion with these people. That to me seems like such a lengthy process, again, with the numbers that we have in this country and the amount of people that do want to own guns. It just seems a bit much. I don't think we have the resources to do it, but who knows? I could be wrong. I just don't think it's smart, especially when a lot of this legislation that these marching people are calling for today, they're naming guns that are already illegal to own. I mean, if you look at Stephen Paddock in Vegas, he did that with illegal things. Like he had guns that were legal. He also had guns and bump stocks and things that were completely illegal. And people are acting like he obtained them through some legal process. Or the way they make it seem is as if like all these people that commit these things with guns that are already illegal or, are already off the map in their area. I just don't think they want to hear that. I think they just want to be upset and speak about the fact that there needs to be more done, but they don't have a real solution. It's just rhetoric at this point. I don't know. I guess that's just kind of where my point ends.
All right, and if you guys want to openly discuss that question, you can. I will allow 5 minutes for that to happen.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's just where I stand, Brenda. I mean, I think it's trickier to do than we think. I don't doubt our human potential over here in the West to absolutely come up with something that works for everybody. But you're always going to have people that are unsatisfied. You're always going to have the extreme groups on the media that get the limelight because they're willing to say the things that grab attention. I mean, that's just how I feel about it.
Brenda, do you want to have a rebuttal to that?
Well, I don't know what else to say other than what I have already said already, which is that um, gun control saves lives, and I want to reduce the incidents where people lose their lives because of guns, and gun control can do that.
Absolutely. No, it's just the kind of gun control that it is, really, is what it comes down to. I mean, I have a little Filipino neighbor who she cuts hair and she tends to her garden. I mean, she's an older lady. I know she keeps a gun in the house to keep herself safe because, you know, she's by herself. I certainly wouldn't want her owning a grenade launcher, but I don't think there's any legal way for her to obtain any type of military ordinance to that magnitude, especially at a civilian level for her. So, I mean, I guess I just don't know where I'm coming from, where it's like, you know, I don't see where the argument is where people are getting their hands on these things when it's already kind of set up where they shouldn't be able to. And if they do, they're committing crimes that are allowing them, like you say, theft, stolen guns. A lot of the crimes that are committed or stolen guns are used in the process. I don't deny that. It's just, you know, it's about how do we make sure they don't end up in the wrong hands, but how do we make sure they don't go away altogether? Because there are other people in the world besides us Americans who have guns. Most of them are militaries. And if, you know, they were to ever, not saying that anytime soon they would, but if they were to ever try and use this as an advantage to come at us, you know, what would we be able to do?
Well, we have the greatest military in the world
Undoubtedly.
in history. You know, nobody's. I don't think that we're at any risk even if we completely disarmed the U.S. populace, which I'm not advocating. I want much stricter gun control, but even if we disarmed the U.S. public, we could easily take on any attempt at a land invasion. They wouldn't get within 100 miles.
No?
Yeah, so I just don't see that happening. And so it doesn't seem like a serious concern to me. It doesn't seem like a serious kind of worry. I'm not worried about the United States being invaded. It doesn't worry me. We have the Second Amendment in order to.
Hold on, guys. I mean, we can turn this into an open discussion. I mean, it kind of is. So I'll leave it a little longer.
Essentially, we have the Second Amendment to protect ourselves from the government turning on us.
And that's where we're going to disagree in this. That's not the origin of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was to establish militias to control the slaves.
That is incorrect.
Well, the fact is that the Second Amendment has never been interpreted as a general right of the people of the United States to own guns. Not until like about 1980, I think it was, with the Heller decision, was it interpreted in that way. It was always about state-run militias and the ability of state-run militias. And those state-run militias at the beginning of the U.S. were used to return escaped slaves back to plantations. That was the main reason that they were created. So that's just the origin of state-run militias, and why they were created, which was to go out and find and bring back escaped slaves.
Regardless of ulterior motives here, I think it's honestly better if the people have the power than the people above us having the power, because then we are just that. We are slaves. I mean, we're already working. I mean, my mother works 5 days a week, all year long, paying her taxes so that our government can keep people in Europe who take 3 to 6 month vacations a year safe. And they sit over there and they pretend like they understand politics and life better than we do when they're living in a country that has barely a tenth of the size of a population we in here in the United States have. And, how is that fair to people like my mother? And then when these people decide over there that they're going to start changing their politics and becoming more, excuse my bias here and how I believe this, but becoming almost in a sense as their spirit of socialism kind of waves over the land over there, eventually that's going to turn on people like us here in the States who don't agree with that way of lifestyle. And it's going to come back on us when we're the ones that are trying to make sure that the rest of these people can enjoy their lives as best as they can. And if they were to ever, I know this sounds like a paranoid, Europe's going to turn on us, but that's not where I'm going with this. I'm just, painting a situation. So that's hypothetical.
Well, I don't think Europe is going to turn on us.
Never.
But
Let's just put it this way.
He didn't say that was a possibility. He said it's a scenario.
It's a,
well,
they never could. Let's put it this way.
The thing is that with people who, such as your mother, who are working hard, the reason that they're not doing well is because of the political policies and the politicians who have been voted into office have screwed people. And the way to fix that is to elect people who don't screw you. And I think in general, that would be the better solution rather than shooting them.
I don't think anyone's going to argue about shooting them, but let's bring an argument to the table here. It's not just an issue of it is an issue of the government, but it's not just that. There's also an issue, very unlikely issue, but what we've seen in the past, it's a very damn good possibility. There's a possibility at any time during an election, during democracy is kind of a flawed system where anything can happen. Any authoritarian regime can rise up at any time. There's a chance, a very slim one, but there's also a chance that a government at any time can turn tyrannical. The Nazis killed the Jews. The commies killed the capitalists in the Soviet Union in the past, and the Jews didn't have guns, so did the commies. All right, the commies at night sent death squads to shoot their political opponents, and the Nazis put Jews in camps and gassed the shit out of them. All right, we've seen this in the past, and so yes, I agree with you. It is a very unlikely issue that it will ever happen again because of what we've seen in the past, but it is still a possibility that a government can turn tyrannical, and citizens do need their guns to fight that back as much as they can.
Using World War II as an example, I mean, my grandfather was a World War II veteran. He was a prisoner of war. He was a heavy bomber in a B-52. He got shot down over Yugoslavia, marched 500 miles in a death march, and then was kept in a concentration camp for 13 months where he was forced to drink piss water and eat rotten potatoes to survive during torture and all kinds of shit. He was an airman, so he was like a prized prisoner. They loved having airmen captured. And he came home from that war with PTSD like I'd never seen before. And I always asked him, Grandpa, do you have any guns? And he told me no. He said, I don't ever want to own a gun. And if it ever comes to war again or any kind of thing that involves guns, I'll tell your mother that she needs to break both of your legs so that you don't have to go to war. And my grandfather was very anti-gun, especially after experiencing a war like that. However, you have me now looking at history, going, okay, when people like that arise, my grandfather ultimately turned to the gun to defend not only my grandmother and the family that he would be starting someday, but his country. He sacrificed his mental well-being to protect us. And while everybody sits around and drinks their lattes and takes their selfies and jerks off to fucking soy porn, I mean, we forget about these people, and we forget about the hard truth of reality that when it comes to the fact that nobody in the world today likes us. I mean, there's some people that do. But America's pretty much got a bad rep for itself. It's just it leaves a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, sadly. And I don't think it should be that way. And I think that if one day, especially these youthful people who refuse to acknowledge history and facts out of their emotional anger outbursts and the way that they just take to the streets like a bunch of fucking bats, I think that once they sway into a bigger number of people and it creates a problem potentially where we're going to need these things to defend ourselves, that's the reality of it. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying it's very interesting to see a lot of people talk about, especially after the election, like, oh, I wouldn't be surprised if a civil war broke out. It's like, okay, well, that's a bit crazy to talk about that. But when you really look at how much people get heated nowadays, I mean, nobody's kind anymore. People are assholes on the road. People are assholes in the supermarket. People are assholes on the internet. I mean, it's a tough world right now. I don't think it would be better if everybody had guns, but I think if everybody understood the reality of guns and that they play in protecting ourselves, you know, who's going to hold up better? The dude with the baseball bat or the dude with the 38 that's coming into your house? You know?
Well,
I mean,
I think the better solution is to have a good police force rather than have to shoot somebody coming into your house. You want to eliminate the crime from at the beginning and have a good police force so that that doesn't happen and you don't have to defend yourself.
But we don't live in that perfect world, unfortunately. I mean, I agree with you. I wish this was a thing we could do, and I don't deny it's something we can do, but I don't think it's as clean cut as that. I'm sorry. I mean, until the police get like time travel technology and can just warp to my front door and arrest the guy, I don't know how that can be effective. I mean, I live in a place that's 600 square miles, but we have almost 2 million people here. And it's packed.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I'm not prepared to discuss crime and police, so I don't know.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Anything about that. I'm just saying as a general rule, if you have to arm yourself to prevent people coming in, you've kind of already lost the war.
What are you saying? I guess re-articulate that.
I mean,
for me.
if society is so bad that you have to arm yourself and defend a fortified position, you're already it's already over for you. You're not your society is already fallen apart. If that's actually the case.
I mean, honestly, you can take a good position and form up a militia of people and still fight back to the government. I mean, yes, you can argue with all the technology the military has today, the militia wouldn't have any truth, but the reality, any weapons to fight back with. But the reality is, not all members of the military are going to stick with citizens in the event of an authoritarian regime going after citizens. All right, not all of them will do that. The military members will realize, oh my God, this horrible government's killing these people. I need to side with them and give them the weapons they need to fight back. All right, I mean, the Nazis would have never killed the Jews if the Jews had good military armory to fight back against the Nazis. And I mean, same thing with the capitalists and political enemies of the Soviet Union. All right, I mean, I'm using World War II as of what could happen in the future, but I mean, I'm using an example of what unlikely could happen.
Well, we have a proto-authoritarian regime that is rounding people up, and nobody seems to be caring about that very much. We have ISIS rounding people up, and nobody cares about it. The reason people didn't stop anything about the Nazis rounding up the Jews is because nobody cared about it. They didn't give a damn about it because they bought the propaganda coming from the Nazis that they were evil.
Brenda, the reason that happened is the Allied powers didn't find out about the concentration camps until they found them. All right, that's one of the reasons. Nobody knew the Nazis were doing that.
Well, that's not true. They knew about it. They just didn't talk about it, and they didn't care about it.
The Allied powers didn't.
No, they knew about the concentration camps. They knew about him.
I mean, here's the logic of this, Brenda. You claim Trump's administration to be an authoritarian regime, but the same sentence, you want
Proto
whatever.
authority.
I mean, if he's such an authoritarian, why do you want citizens to not have guns? Why, in case of any time Trump becomes authoritarian and starts putting Mexicans in camps, or even black people, unlikely scenario. But I'm just saying, if that's the same sentence you want, if that's the scenario that you think this country's in, why in God's name do you want citizens to be disarmed?
Because the society is better off that way. I don't want.
I mean, society isn't better off if theoretically Trump starts killing Mexicans in camps and shit.
Well, you're not going to stop a government doing what it wants to do with handguns. It just isn't going to happen. They have
not with handguns.
They have fighter planes. They have a lot better hardware.
I mean, I know. I mean, I don't really want to stick on this topic all day, but I know the military of the United States has better armory than the citizens do. But if the citizens did form up a militia against a oppressive government, they do have a chance of fighting back because, as I mentioned earlier, not all members of the military are going to side with the regime. All right, some are going to side with the citizens. It's the same thing with the Nazi generals did. Nazi generals sometimes did side with the Jews because the Nazis were getting too fucking oppressive. All right, I mean, I watched.
But the citizens are cheering on the regime.
Do you guys know what the SWAT TF officer for the LVPD said after they engaged Stephen Paddock in Vegas and he had killed himself? He said that man had cameras set up in the hallway. He had ordnance that was illegal to own, and he was ready. Tactically, he was ready, and if he wanted to, we were dead. We were coming down a hallway. He could have easily taken us out. The fact that he killed himself was the only reason they were able to get in there and finish this whole shit. I mean, he could have wiped out that entire SWAT team, and they even admit it. It's scary to think about, especially when it's a bad person. But if we're painting a scenario where he's trying to defend his land from people that say the government's like, hey, that guy's got a nice farm out there in Iowa, and we want to build a Mexican concentration camp. This is for the sake of this silly little argument. We're coming for that land. We're being tyrannical. We want your land so we can build this Mexican concentration camp for the president. What are you going to do about it? You don't have any guns. We're taking it. By the way, we don't believe in property rights anymore because communism's in full swing now. Whatever the hell's going on, who cares? Essentially, if that man were educated enough, skilled enough on the practical use of guns, and he had the ability to do so, he could defend himself.
Well, the threat isn't a communist government. We aren't anywhere
Of
close
course
to that.
not.
We aren't even close to.
It's a deter. It's to deter them from having the forethought or the foresight to try and do something like that.
What we are close to is a right-wing authoritarian government in the U.S. And right now, the right is cheering on everything that Trump is doing. And he's the threat, and nobody seems to care that he is rounding up people and that he is taking away people's rights. And that was the point that I made before, which is that the right is just fine with having the rights of people they don't like taken away from them. The problem is that that's going to come back to bite them.
I don't think you can virtue signal for the right on that issue.
That's a wild assumption, honestly. That's really wild.
I hate to disagree. I just don't think that you can say that about a right in general. I mean, if you're referring to the people in the government that are on the right, I mean, okay, I hear you.
Yeah, the government is
you.
extremely right-wing right
But
now.
It doesn't mean we're authoritarian.
Right.
I think Trump has authoritarian leanings and would like to.
When you own a business, you have to run it authoritarian.
The U.S. is not a business. We're a democracy.
I'm talking about what Trump has experience is in business, not politics.
Well, then he doesn't belong in government.
Well, he got there, so I mean, I'm not trying to stop the man.
Yeah. So I think that he has authoritarian tendencies that are very concerning, and it isn't. The people on the right tend to express this concern
But what about
that
Germany?
the communists are coming, and it isn't the communists who are coming. It's the quote unquote fascists. It's right wing. The better term than fascism is right wing authoritarianism and nationalism. That's what's coming. That's just as bad as. I am a centrist, or I am a left of center liberal Democrat. I'm not a leftist in the Marxist sense, and I'm not a rightist in the ultra conservative sense. I like the middle ground, and I consider both ends of the spectrum to be dangerous.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're wildly assuming what Trump supporters want in this country, and I mean, I got to defend them. Sorry, I got to do.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I mean, I don't want illegal immigrants deported because I hate them. I want illegal immigrants deported because they're a threat, an economic threat to this country. All right, they will bankrupt the taxpayer. They will.
I guess what I'm just trying to figure out is, like, give me some examples here. Like, what makes you say all this?
Who, me or Brenda?
Oh, Brenda.
What makes me say that I am more concerned about right-wing authoritarianism than left-wing authoritarianism is because it's the right that's in charge of the levers of power right now. It isn't the left.
It's not necessarily an example. That's just how the democracy ended up falling.
I really doubt Trump wants to deport illegal immigrants because of their skin color. I just doubt that.
I see a lot of people say this, just to give you a little bit of like.
It's a push by liberal media, honestly. It really is.
Just to give you like a quick little rundown. I mean, I was raised in a very left-leaning family. I had a lot of friends that were left-leaning. I went to schools where it was very left-leaning. I voted for Obama twice. I'll be honest. And then, this last time around, I kind of, we get mail-in ballots. Like I said, my father's disabled. He can't go to the polls. So I'm standing there at the end of August, before all this is even going on, already voting. And I'm in my kitchen. I'm looking at the paper and I'm going, what do I want anymore? What do I want to do? It was a really weird situation to be in because I was fed up at that point. I was fed up with the bullshit I was fed. During the 90s, they tried to make us think life was just fucking sunshine candy and all this bullshit. And the world's a great place, and yes, people in India have free speech, probably. I mean, just crazy shit I heard around me all the time, and I was just like, I didn't get it, and then
it was reasonably good during the 90s.
I had to start really paying attention for myself rather than relying on all this hype talk. But I don't mean to cut this debate short. My girlfriend is here, so.
Oh, okay.
She's calling my phone right now. I had a lovely discussion, Brenda. I look forward to more with you guys in the future. Thank you.
It's no problem. It's no problem.
Have a good afternoon.
Well,
we kind of went off topic there.
Well, that's to be expected.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on, and I already left. If
It's
someone
no problem.
would like to speak, Brenda, do you have any more time?
I have some more time. I have some things I'm going to need to do before too long. I need to go
about how long
grocery
do you
shopping.
have?
Wow. I mean, I have the afternoon, but I don't want to spend another hour here.
Okay. How about 30 minutes? Is that fine with you?
Okay.
So are we
If someone
still?
would like to speak with Brenda here, just at me. Okay, Logan.
All right.
All right.
I need
Should be
to
unmuted.
get back on the. Yeah.
Hold on, I just really got one question. I want to go back to whenever you said that militias were created, like the entire Second Amendment was to create militias to put down slaves. Like, half the things that you've said, where do you get this information from? Because I don't think even CNN goes this far sometimes. I genuinely want to know where you get this information. Because a lot of it seems like it's just out the ass.
Well, I mean, you and I both know where she gets it from. I mean, come on. I mean, it doesn't even have to be CNN. That there are worse radical leftist media out there than CNN. CNN's a pot field now. If liberal media were drugs,
It's just fucking. I don't know. It's so ridiculous. You should be able to see through.
I mean,
The young
hearing someone say that we want to deport illegal immigrants because we have a hatred for them, I'm sorry, that's just untrue. The reason anyway.
But I didn't say that. I don't think I said
I mean,
that.
that's isn't that what you're pointing to?
I think that there is a very strong strain of xenophobia in the United States right now. It's an irrational dislike of people from outside of the country.
It's a dislike of economic burden on the taxpayer. Because to have these amount of illegal immigrants come in, and they need housing, they need education, they need certain things to survive in America for them not to be in poverty. All right, and so the reason why we don't want them in this country is because it is just such an economic burden. The taxpayers are going to have to spend so much to the government, and the government's going to have to spend so much on them. When in fact, without illegal immigrants, we already have problems. We have so many amount of the black population in poverty. We need roads to fix. We have infrastructure that's broken. I mean, we need to fix some stuff before we focus on these people, and that's where I want our money to go towards.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
like, I would just like to point out. So on average, we're spending not a gross but a net of $45.8 billion on illegal aliens. And I live here in Texas. I know more Mexican people than I do white people. And I'll tell you what, the legal ones share the same sentiment that I do, that it's ridiculous that these people can get by in life without having to pay taxes while taking jobs that we would be using. And using all the same services that are available to us that we paid for, that they are essentially stealing.
Well, most immigrants or immigrant labor does jobs that the natives, the citizens of the U.S., don't want to do. Things like nobody wants to spend 10 hours a day with doing back-breaking work like picking tomatoes or picking celery or whatever. People don't want to do that. They won't do it. They just won't.
That's not true.
So,
I know plenty of natives that do that.
Well,
I personally worked on a ranch for about 5 years, so
Yeah, I've lived on a farm for 10 years. I pick tomatoes all the time.
I grew up on a farm, but the experience is that when Georgia kicked out the immigrants who were migrant workers working the truck farms in Georgia, the tomatoes rotted in the field because they couldn't find anybody at any price who was willing to go out in the fields and pick tomatoes. They just couldn't, and that's why they changed their tune. They changed their tune real fast. They changed their tune real fast.
You're taking one state out of the entire country. I mean, I don't mind immigrants. I love immigrants. I love them coming here legally and with citizenship and stuff. I mean, I want that to happen. The reason.
So do I.
That's the reason it's such an economic issue, is because the reason they mostly come here all the time illegally is because of either two reasons. They're desperate to come here and they can't afford to come here. I think that needs to be fixed. But at the same time, what makes me support for Trump is, with the wall and stuff, is we need to control this. We can't let this get out of hand. We can't just let them cross the border willy-nilly like that. We need to fix our own country first. We have infrastructure that's broken. We have our own citizens that are in poverty and all that stuff. We have a bad education system. I mean, we're 27 in education in the world?
Well, you need to
Yes.
vote for people who are willing to fund public education, and you should vote for people. The immigrants aren't coming here walking across the southern border. No, that's not how people are getting here. That's not how they're getting in. And so
That's a lie.
the wall isn't going to do jack shit about that. It isn't going to
Yeah,
do
no.
anything.
And I mean, it's not even just an immigration issue. It's to prevent sex trafficking. It's to prevent drugs, and it's not just an immigration issue.
Well, I don't think the wall is going to do anything. And generally, when civilizations erect a
Well, the
wall,
wall-
you can
but
count
that
you can
fencing-
count the
fencing-
days until they collapse. I mean, that's usually a sign of a failing
Our country's
civilization.
going to even more collapse if you give these people money that we can't afford. That's a burden on the taxpayer. That's a burden on the worker.
We give them money because
you
they
have
do
to-
jobs we want done
you
that
have to
we're not
spend-
willing to do.
You have to spend so much money for them to even get the chance that we have. I mean, you have to spend so much money for them to get a good education, and to get a good job. You need a good education. You need to spend so
Yeah.
much money on them for them even to have a chance like we do. All right, and that's going to economically burden us and put us in poverty along with it.
So we don't need a lot of education to pick tomatoes. It doesn't take a lot of education
You
to
do
do
need
that.
a lot of education for military and for steel workers and stuff. Yeah, we do. That's our backbone.
We don't have a steel industry hardly anymore. It's all got shipped to China. If you got a problem with those, you should have a problem with those politicians who sent your jobs over to China.
I do actually. I kind of do.
Yeah.
And we know we do still have a steel industry. We simply don't manufacture things. We still produce raw resources.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a lot cheaper. The Chinese steel is a lot cheaper, I understand.
On top of that, picking tomatoes and stuff. Like in America, we have a massive population of homeless and jobless citizens that could be doing those jobs and do those jobs whenever they're given. So why are we displacing them?
Well, because they're often a lot of those people are mentally ill or in other ways, wouldn't be able to sit there and pick tomatoes for 16 hours a day. They're not able to do that. But the immigrants are willing and able to do it, and Americans are not. And that's why we have them here. That we have them here to sit there and work on doing lawn care and other jobs that we don't want to do. If one way to address the illegal and undocumented workers that come into the U.S. would be to allow for more people to come in, expand the legal immigration so that more people could come in legally. Also, spending money to educate people actually improves your economy. Immigrants are actually good for the economy because they contribute to the economy, they pay taxes, they do work, and they create jobs. Immigration is a net plus for any economy, and many countries have immigration policies for exactly that reason, because they're aware that immigrants are a labor force that make their economy stronger.
I mean, to some extent, I agree with that. But you're talking about immigrants that come in through the system, and I'm talking about immigrants that don't. Okay, I mean, they're coming here for reasons. All right, one of the main reasons is they can't afford to get a citizenship. I think that needs lowered, just like any Democrat thinks that. Okay, and with that, our taxpayers are gonna be spending so much money on these people that need a chance to get a good education, get good jobs, and get good housings to where they don't go in the poverty line. All right, I mean, with immigration, if you come in through the system legally, you have more of a chance getting out of the poverty line and having a good education and good housing. All right, that's just how it works. But the reason they come here without a system is because they can't afford it, and they're coming here from oppressive countries and poor countries that They can't eat and stuff. All right, that's an issue. That's an issue with the world.
Yeah, it is. It is. So another way to help would simply be to have one of the reasons, at least that I've heard. I'm not sure about how much I can assure you on this, but one of the reasons I've heard that we have a lot of illegal immigrants is because the corporations want it that way. They want illegal immigrants because they're easier to control. Because if they're illegal, you can hire them and fire them at will, because they can't. It's not like they can complain to anybody. But if they were U.S. citizens, they could, because then there are laws about how you handle American workers legally. But if they're illegal, you can treat them like crap.
I don't agree with that, honestly.
So what you do then as a company is you lobby the government to lower the number of legal immigrants who are come in, but we still need the jobs. So illegal immigrants come in, and then you can take advantage of those illegal immigrants and run your business how you like, and fire and hire at will without having to worry about wage laws. And I think that might be part of the reason we have a large number of illegal immigrants.
Part of the reason, but I mean, I'm talking about them coming here.
Well, another thing I've heard is that immigration is at a net zero. There are as many people coming into the country as are leaving it. And so my understanding is that the net immigration into the United States matches the number of people who are going out, or it does so relatively closely, so that it's either close to or is actually a net zero. So there really isn't that any actual worry about, or shouldn't be any worry about us being overrun by immigrants.
It's not the issue of overrun. It's the issue of economics.
Well,
Yeah,
immigrants.
I don't have a problem with immigrants. I have a problem with the way that they impact, like, my bank account.
Well, they help a country. Your bank account is doing poorly because of the policies of people that have been put into office.
While I agree with that, I still think them coming in here illegally will worsen my bank account, because I have to spend so much money for them to get not even a chance that I have. I mean, we would spend so much money on them, and it still wouldn't help them. It would barely help them, in fact, because they, not only that, but they got families they're coming with. They need to provide education to their families. I mean, 11 million of these people. That's an issue. That's a big issue with us. I mean, you're saying they will help economically, but for us to do that, for that to happen, we have to spend so much money on them for them to do that. And that money will most likely put every middle class American in debt, extremely.
Well, I think that this was a good discussion. I appreciate the invitation. I'm happy that I got to say what I wanted to say. It was all thank you to everybody involved. It was all very respectful, mostly, and maybe another time, sometime. It seemed to have gone well, and this is how more conversations on the internet ought to be. So thank you for the invitation.
Welcome.
Thank you, Brenda and Ancon coming, and who's this, Logan, for speaking. It's been great. Yeah,
Oh, where this is going to be
say
put?
goodbyes or last words.
Yeah, this is going. Can you send when you put this on YouTube? Can you send me a link, please?
Yeah, me too.
Sure, no problem. I'll post it on the announcements.
Okay, doke. Thank you.
I also wanted to put in one last 2 cents about gun control. You were
Sure.
talking about gun-related deaths earlier, and I would like to say the vast majority of that is suicides, with only 11,000 being gun homicides a year. And on top of that, there's a stark contrast to the numbers provided by the CDC on lives saved with legally owned a gun in the U.S. being anywhere from 500,000 to 3 million using the current gun control laws that we have in the U.S. And yeah,
All right. If that's all we want to say, thank you, Brenda, for coming. Thank you, Logan, for speaking, and Ancon for moderating.
No problem.
Hope you
It
two have a
went
great
very
day.
nicely.